Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, life is really funny, isn't it? At the end of 2018, I made my little resolutions video. What am I going to do in 2019? I looked back at what I'd accomplished and hadn't accomplished in terms of role-playing games during 2018. And one of the things I said I had not accomplished was learning and really mastering Fantasy Flight Games, the narrative dice system, the system that powers the Star Wars games and the Genesys, the generic system. And I said, you know what, this year I'm not going to make that a high priority. I'm going to concentrate on some other things. And so what is my group playing right now? Well, we've decided to play Star Wars. So we're playing Age of Rebellion, and which is okay, and we're just doing it because group conscience, which is cool. I dig the system. But this brought up something that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time and wrestling about, whether or not I really want to bring it up. And because 2019 is the year of honesty and speaking the truth about some of the issues that we see in role-playing games, I decided I was going to tackle this. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about Genesys. And there it is. I don't know how well you can see it here on my iPad. This is the PDF. I do not own the hard copy, and there's a reason why. And I'll talk about that a little bit. Now, I was really intrigued by the narrative dice system. I, got introduced to that concept by Runeslinger, watching his Star Wars videos. I really got interested in how this narrative dice system worked. I wanted to learn it. I just wasn't sure if I really wanted to invest that much time and energy into the IP of Star Wars, even though I really like Star Wars. I wasn't quite sure. And so I was really excited and intrigued when they announced that they were going to be making this a generic system. I was really pumped. So when the PDF finally came out, in I think it was late 2017, I bought it immediately. And I read it a couple times. I learned the mechanics. I learned how the system worked, and etc. But I noticed something. And I was not the only person to notice this. Other people started talking about this. The book was missing at least 100 pages. Now, the book is something like 248, 250 pages, I think, and it covers, how skills work. It has a talent trees of sorts. It talks to you a bit about how combat works, etc. Gives you some, vehicle combat rules. The various nuts and bolts of how a system works. But it's missing a whole bunch of examples. Specifically, it's missing, how to do in detail, like magic or psychic type powers. It's missing detailed explanations of equipment, like just big equipment lists, bunches of stats. It's missing vehicle stats. It's missing a lot of the information you need to use to run a lot of vehicle combat, etc. There's a lot of gear. There's just a lot of stuff. The lists of stuff, the stats on armor, etc. It's missing a lot of that. It talks about it. It talks about how to build them. It's even missing a lot of adversaries. It gives you a couple examples. It talks about how to build them, but even when it goes through, I forget how many different genres, it gives you these little 10-page description of, half of which is just flavor text and what's important to run a fantasy game. When it actually gives you the stats, the details, the mechanical information we need to know, it's lacking. You compare this to the Star Wars books, because I've read, like Edge of the Empire, I'm reading through Age of Rebellion. There's lots and lots and lots of information in there. And Genesys is Star Wars with the serial numbers filed off. Generic systems cannot do it all. We've talked about that in the past. If you're going to play with Genesys, no matter what kind of genre you apply it to, it's going to be pulpy. It's going to be swingy. It's going to feel like Star Wars to a certain extent. So if you're cool with that, great. Use Genesys to run that. But this PDF or the book, this core book, should contain all the information you need to start to run something like that. And so I have friends that say, well, yes, it does. You can simply take the time to create all these other things because it gives you this guideline. It's not why I bought the book. I have a life. I have a job. I have other responsibilities. I have other interests. And when I purchase a product that bills itself as a complete generic role-playing system, I expect it to be a complete generic role-playing system. Genesys is Star Wars with the serial numbers filed off. There's no excuse for taking all the Star Wars equipment, not taking all the Star Wars equipment, and they say the Star Wars force powers, which magic, all the various vehicle stats, filing the serial numbers off of all those things and making them generic equipment, generic vehicles, generic magic rules. Give you a couple other examples of how to do that. Maybe some generic talents, generic monsters, the various adversaries, the things that you'll find in the various Star Wars books. There's no excuse for not, de-Star Warsizing You know what I mean? Making them generic. Putting all those lists in there. It's not like they hadn't invented all that stuff already. And the only reason I can think of that they didn't do that is because they want you to buy all their other IPs that are going to use the Genesys system. But then, well, you're not buying a generic role-playing game. What you're doing is you're buying the core engine of these other games that they're going to sell you. And that just, it rubs me the wrong way. If I pay my money for a generic role-playing game system, that's what I expect to get. I expect to get something that's complete. And to me, it just feels unconscionable that they didn't include that information. And, once again, I've had people say, well, there's a vibrant online community. You can find all that stuff online. It's not why I bought the book. I shouldn't have to do all that extra research to find out what I need to decide, you know what, I want to play some weird cyberpunk, in whatever, with aliens and stuff. I want this genre, and I want to use the Genesys system for it. I shouldn't then have to spend all this time trying to figure out the stats for everything when it's already available. They've done the work. And other generic systems have figured out through trial and error what you need to include in a book. There's no excuse for Fantasy Flight Games not, learning from their mistakes and doing it right the first time. We've been making role-playing games for a while now. And so I'm still excited to play the game. I still like the Genesys system. I'm still excited to play Star Wars. I'm excited to use the generic system to do other things. But to be honest with you, I'm disappointed and quite honestly mad that the information that I expected to find in this core book wasn't there. And so, it's 2019. It's a year of honesty. So I think at this point, I'm calling Fantasy Flight Games on really omitting a lot of information that should have been in this book. What do you think about that?